Starmer's trying to place himself centre stage. And yet he's not centre stage. He's gone to this sulky emergency summit, Macron's emergency summit in Paris, where all these EU loser leaders are all going, I can't believe they didn't want us at the talks.
Keir Starmer got humiliated by Trump and had a complete mental breakdown in his latest idiotic move.
And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop.
After Trump's shocking bombshell, Starmer's begging for support and being completely ignored.
British troops on the ground in Ukraine. It will have sounded crazy a couple of years ago, but that's exactly the proposal that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has put on the table at a summit in Paris.
Starmer's crashing out with a deranged move that puts Britain at serious risk.
Keir Starmer, right, he's sort of trying to pretend that somehow or other his invitation to the American and Russian peace talks in Saudi Arabia on Ukraine must have got lost in the post or something. You know, I'm the bridge between Europe and them. No, you're not. But then he's also talking about sort of putting boots on the ground to keep the peace in Ukraine.
Starmer's fragile ego has been shattered as he's getting ignored by the entire world.
The other point being, he hasn't got any boots to put on the ground. Apparently, if we were to place a peacekeeping force after some kind of settlement in Ukraine that would be able to have any effect at all, we'd need about 100,000 British soldiers to go. At a stretch, we might just be able to manage 5,000. So he's talking in fantasy land for a start.
Labour's making empty threats and Starmer is crashing out with desperate moves.
He's trying to act like he's at the center of things. But while America and Russia, and by the way, tomorrow Zelensky arrives in Saudi Arabia as well, so I don't, I'm just hearing, is he not coming now? I'm just hearing, oh, Zelensky's now saying he's not going to Saudi Arabia. But either way, Starmer's trying to place himself center stage.
Starmer and his cronies are getting a harsh reality check as they realize how irrelevant they are.
This sulky emergency summit, Macron's emergency summit in Paris, where all these EU loser leaders are all going, I can't believe they didn't want us at the talks. And as if to prove what a dysfunctional mob they are, the fact they couldn't agree what day of the week it is if you sat them down for a year.
All the European liberal elites are throwing tantrums with pointless summits while Trump gets the job done.
These are early stages of negotiations. I don't like a lot of what America is saying about these early stages of negotiations, but they are very early. And I think it's very important we don't overreact. The problem with the European setup is, as you sort of hinted at, I think then, is most of the European leaders, they are either unpopular or they're about to face elections. And so anything they agree on really can't be relied upon.
Yeah, good point.
You know, we know Keir Starmer is 20%, you know, he's lost 20% in the opinion polls. He's third in some British opinion polls at the moment.
Labour's woke virus is simply trying to mislead and gaslight the public again to somehow win support.
You can go through all the various European governments, and it's very difficult for them to agree on anything. You know, even if they were all capable of agreeing lines, a common line, they can't because of either elections or unpopularity. And so America must look over the Atlantic and look at this squabbling pack of politicians, and somehow Keir Starmer is going to say, I'm going to be the bridge between this group of politicians and you. It's just laughable.
Stupid Starmer's stuck between a rock and a hard place as the European Union struggles to accept reality.
Europe is fundamentally incapable, when it really matters, of coming to a big decision on things that really matter. And it is ridiculous that for 40, 50 years, we've had to rely on America to defend our continent. But I'm not optimistic that the European countries will do what they most need to. Forget about Ukraine, forget about anything to do with Ukraine at the moment. At the moment, the transatlantic guarantee is in danger. Europe clearly needs to spend more on its defence, but do you have any confidence that these squabbling politicians will agree on a plan?
The European Union is left terrified because America has had enough of their indecisive shenanigans.
So if you have a trilateral agreement between America, Russia, and you know, the guy in the frame, Zelensky, Ukraine, then you got a good deal. And their instinct instincts to say, let's not invite those squabbling losers here to Saudi Arabia because they'll just make any kind of agreement completely impossible, is correct. Is correct. Those people, they're dysfunctional. They're dysfunctional. And
Trump has the right idea to not invite idiots like Starmer and the European Union to peace talks, as they only create more problems.
that speech, I was just talking to Rod Little about that, that speech, that brilliant, mesmerising speech that J.D. Vance made in Munich last Friday, where he roasted these cowering EU leaders and essentially said, you want us to be your friend, you want America to be your allies, you better start encouraging freedom of speech and not killing it stone dead.
America has made a huge statement after countless disappointments from Starmer and his liberal European buddies. Trump has made it clear that he won't tolerate weakness anymore, and Starmer's on the verge of a mental breakdown already. The entire situation with Ukraine is a mess, and Europe's whinings are a major part of it. Trump stepped in to solve the crisis within months, and Starmer's fuming over how he's been tossed aside. Naturally, in typical Starmer-ism fashion, he's now trying to make matters worse with an insane announcement.
At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, it is an existential question for Europe as a whole, and therefore vital for Britain's national interest. This is a once-in-a-generation moment for the collective security of our continent. Only a lasting peace in Ukraine that safeguards its sovereignty will deter Putin from further aggression in the future.
Starmer's not exactly wrong about Putin's aggression being a larger problem for the entire West. Russia is very much a huge threat to Britain's peace and prosperity, and the entire Europe is anxious about it. However, Starmer's lack of common sense has led him to come up with idiotic solutions to a valid problem. Instead of increasing the defense budget and making sure that Britain is self-sufficient enough to stop Russia and be taken seriously, delusional Starmer is making deranged threats.
Now, recent statements by the US administration should not come as a surprise. President Trump has long expressed the wish for Europe to step up and meet the demands of its own security, that he wants to get a lasting peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine.
Let's face it, as things stand at the moment, Europe and Starmer's Britain are a dead weight that Trump is trying to get rid of. The Trump administration has been making sharp speeches lately that have completely shredded Europe to bits and left Starmer seething like a toddler. Only now, after being threatened and treated like a clown, is Starmer coming to terms with the brutal reality that Britain isn't as strong as it once was.
So today's informal meeting of European leaders was a vital first step in responding to that challenge. On defence, it's clear the US is not going to leave NATO. But we Europeans will have to do more.
They can hold as many nonsensical meetings as they want to stroke their egos, but nothing will change unless Starmer and his cronies let go of their delusions. Isn't it pathetic that Starmer still can't make a speech without needing a script? To make matters worse, he's subtly revealing his sinister agenda. Behind the scenes, Starmer still considers Britain to be European and is trying everything he can to chain us back to them. All we've seen from this shambolic government are lies and empty promises. Now, Starmer expects us to believe that he'll be Ukraine's saviour while betraying British national interests.
On Ukraine, we're at the very early stage of the process. Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
Just when Trump got the Ukrainian conflict under control, Starmer is intent on making it worse. After years of brutal warfare, the tensions are finally de-escalating, and Labour's brilliantly stupid idea is to deploy British soldiers in Ukraine. Granted, Starmer says that British forces will only serve as peacekeeping forces. It's still a very reckless move considering how it might end up provoking Putin. The other European leaders aren't as idiotic as Starmer, and in a move that nobody expected, they're starting to abandon Starmer.
So I will go to Washington next week to meet President Trump, and to discuss what we see as the key elements of a lasting peace. I spoke to President Zelensky on Friday, and will do so again in coming days. And we envisage a further meeting with European colleagues when I return from the US. In this moment, we have to recognise the new era that we are in.
What we're seeing right now is an arrogant man like Starmer running around the world because he's too immature and incompetent to see things clearly. Sure, Labour and their cronies can go running to America all they want, but that won't change a single thing. The reality is that everyone, including America and Trump, are fed up with Starmer's constant and disgusting betrayals. We're in a new era where the woke liberal nonsense is slowly becoming irrelevant and obsolete for good.
And I've been clear today, Britain will take a leading responsibility, as we always have, because Ukraine must have a secure future, Europe must have a secure future, Britain must have a secure future, and democratic values must prevail.
Ask yourself, do we have the capabilities and resources to make a commitment such as this? What Starmer's doing is completely short-sighted and appalling when you consider the potential consequences. To make matters worse, it's not just that Putin might be provoked, there's the other factor of the British public having to endure a massive burden of a war we don't need to get directly involved in. The more you look into the details of Starmer's commitment to deploy British soldiers, the more concerning his dangerous actions get.
British troops on the ground in Ukraine. It will have sounded crazy a couple of years ago, but that's exactly the proposal that Prime Minister Keir Starmer has put on the table at a summit in Paris today. Yes, an emergency summit at the Elysee Palace. European leaders are getting together to discuss the future of Ukraine in the light of negotiations beginning also today in the Middle East.
Starmer's plan to send in our soldiers to Ukraine is pure insanity that makes no sense whatsoever when you consider the potential consequences. On top of that, Britain's alone in this commitment as Starmer's beloved European cronies have thrown him under the bus. Yet again, the European Union has proven just how cowardly and useless they are by betraying Starmer in the most satisfying way possible.
Critics say that 10,000 troops deployed by Britain wouldn't actually be 10,000 troops at all. No, 10,000 troops deployed by Britain to be on the ground in Ukraine would mean each and every one of those troops would need another in rotation and one in training. Suddenly, the real deployment costs of 10,000 troops looks a lot closer to 30,000 troops, given the normal rotation of military deployment.
Make no mistake, we do not have the manpower or the money to fund a plan such as this. Rachel Reeves is busy clobbering the economy and our troops are dwindling in numbers. The obvious question is, what fuels Europe's arrogant audacity to pretend that they can come up with any other solution? If these appalling idiots were any competent, the war wouldn't have raged on for years. Trump's offering Ukraine a way out and giving Starmer a chance to turn things around. Sadly, Sir Keir is simply too tone-deaf to listen.
Some estimates suggest that our army could be as low as 70,000 individuals in the coming years. Could we really be deploying almost half of our entire armed force capability in Ukraine? And what would that say about any other security challenge that we'd have around the world? What would that say about the security of the United Kingdom?
Firstly, the size of our army has been getting increasingly small. To make matters worse, a good amount of military equipment that we have is either worn out or too outdated to be effective in war. The second damning point is that ground forces aren't as simple as just sending in 10,000 people. These soldiers would need rations, supplies, shifts, and more than double the manpower.
I can't help but wondering when I see Sir Keir Starmer strut up to Macron there and the rest of them. This is all performative optics. None of them have a single say in what goes on in this deal. It's all down now to Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. So what's the point of all this?
They want to still have a say, there's no doubt, but they are not even slowly but surely, but very quickly being frozen out of that process. Now, the Americans have said that once these preliminary talks in Saudi Arabia, if they pave the way for actually more formalised peace negotiations.
At the end of the day, Starmer doesn't get a say in what happens with Ukraine anymore. Europe and Starmer were given a chance and they bottled it in the most horrible way possible. They have proved to the world just how weak and useless they are by allowing this war to continue pointlessly into a stalemate. Now, Trump has taken over, and Starmer is being treated like an unimportant clown. Everything else is simply a desperate performance.
Remember J.D. Vance last week saying there's a new sheriff in town, and that new sheriff in town is already shooting from the hip, isn't he? And those European leaders, those deputy sheriffs, probably never thought that they might be in the firing line.
Starmer's woke madness has gone on for too long, and now he's crashing out with insane moves like deploying British forces on a whim just to make a pointless statement. Donald Trump couldn't care less about Starmer's tantrums, and neither does Putin. Europe is powerless beyond belief at the moment, and they're furious about it. The socialist agenda is being stomped upon, and Trump's bombshell peace negotiations with Putin has sent Starmer into a downward spiral.
The big question, boots on the ground, British boots on the ground. Heck, a lot of people, Mark White, getting in touch today with GB News saying, why are we getting involved in a foreign war like this? And more to the point, we've got the smallest army since Napoleonic times. We could barely fill a football stadium with our army. How have we got the spare capacity to be manning the ground in Ukraine?
Think about it rationally. It makes no sense to get involved in a foreign conflict with Britain in its current state. We are struggling economically thanks to Rachel Reeves's nightmare budget and endless tax raids. On top of that, Labour's soft on crime stance has ruined our society, and the immigration crisis is getting more and more absurd. Now, given all that, who in their right mind would want to deploy soldiers in Ukraine? Starmer seems to be having an ego trip, and it's backfiring horribly. His beloved European cronies abandoned him in an instant, leaving Starmer looking like a buffoon.
Keir Starmer has been humiliated today. The German Chancellor has rejected Starmer's plans for Ukraine. So last night, our Prime Minister said this.
On Ukraine, we're at the very early stage of the process. Europe must play its role. And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground, alongside others, if there is a lasting peace agreement.
Starmer wanted to act as Mr. Big Shot, making ridiculously insane announcements like deploying troops. However, he ended up being the laughing stock of the entire world as every single European leader turned their back on him. Starmer's alone in his idiotic quest for relevance in the Ukrainian conflict, as even Germany has backed out. The amount of damage this gang of woke politicians have done to Europe will take years to recover, but their downfall is imminent.
Now it's emerged that Olaf Scholz stormed out of a meeting with European leaders and is refusing to put troops in Ukraine. This is exactly why the idea of a European army is a complete joke. It could never work. European leaders can't agree on anything. But just look at how embarrassing this is for Starmer. He's been sucking up to the EU for years. He's on record calling for a second referendum.
It's right that Parliament has the first say. It's right that Parliament has the first say. But if we need to break the impasse, our options must include campaigning for a public vote, and nobody is ruling out Remain as an option.
European unity is a delusional fantasy that Starmer dreams about every day. There's no way these buffoons can agree on a single thing, because at the end of the day, they're all just virtue signaling with no intentions for acting on their words. Just like Starmer, the European Union is filled with hypocrites who mislead, manipulate, and lie about their true intentions. On top of all that, a united European army is an even bigger joke because it will never happen. Mainly because these countries lack spine and are incredibly weak as a result.
Here we go, the first big test. Was all that sucking up worth it, Keir? He gets into the room with Olaf. He says, right then, Olaf, the Russians are coming. And let's be honest, they'll be in Berlin before they're in London, won't they? So we think that we should put some troops on the border to show everyone how much we care about each other. What does Olaf do? He sticks two fingers up to him and storms out. There's your great reset, Sir Keir. It's in tatters. Keir Starmer is finding out the hard way that his mates in Europe...
So, let's get one thing straight. Starmer spent years bending over backwards for European nations like Germany just for them to throw him under the bus within minutes. The bitter truth is that countries like Germany simply do not care much about the British public and our fate. Just like Starmer, they're too blinded and tone deaf by their sinister socialist agenda that is spreading through Europe like a plague.
All right, what a ridiculous bunch of people that is. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, when she was German defence minister, she made her armed forces train with broom handles because they didn't have enough guns. Donald Tusk is there. His country borders Ukraine. He's refusing to send troops. I mean, this guy is an EU fanatic, by the way.
I've been wondering what that special place in hell looks like for those who promoted Brexit without even a sketch of a plan how to carry it safely.
These supposed leaders are an absolute joke that nobody seems to take seriously. Not only is it utterly humiliating for Starmer and his cronies to be made into total clowns, it also shows that the European countries have no spine whatsoever. The idea that maintaining a closer relationship with hypocrites like these countries was a horrible one to begin with, and we're only seeing a glimpse of the consequences. Make no mistake, we will not gain any positive benefits by cozying up to them instead of America, but Starmer's too idiotic to see that.
There he is, of course, again. Oh, look at him. Look at him. Starmer's dear friend Olaf, the German Chancellor. Well, when Putin rolled into Ukraine, and it looked highly likely that he was going to take the entire country, we sent weapons. We sent hardware. Germany sent a few helmets. Yeah, seriously. The idea that we take lectures from Germany on anything is laughable. The Germans get off very lightly, in my opinion. They've done more damage to the world and Europe and any other nation, as far as I can tell.
Britain has no need or obligation to rush into the Ukrainian conflict as if it's the only thing that matters. Of course, solidarity is one thing, but Starmer is putting Ukraine over Britain's national interests, and that is a huge betrayal of public trust. The people are tired of being treated as the second priority, and a furious backlash is mounting against Starmer's impulsive and stupid actions. Germany alone has done tons of more damage to us than our literal enemies have. At this point, we really need to pick our allies closely.
And now here we are. Keir Starmer has gone cap in hand to this cabal of weirdos time and time again, apologising for Britain, speaking from a position of weakness, when the reality is that Great Britain is better than every single one of those EU countries, and now he's let them mug him off. It's humiliating.
Despite all common sense and rationality, Starmer's arrogance and tone-deaf behaviour is getting out of control. This guy begs the European Union to take him seriously and is borderline obsessed with them. Yet, when push comes to shove, Europe abandons him without a second thought. This isn't just disgrace and humiliation for Starmer and his idiotic Labour Party, it's ruining Britain's reputation as well. To make matters worse, the consequences of Starmer's lunatic actions will haunt us for years. Deploying our military that's already stretched thin is a horrible idea. Starmer thinks he can do whatever he sees fit, but the Brits are demanding accountability. Now, that's something you can help out with by liking the video and subscribing to the channel.